The Man in the Red Hoodie. Part 1. The First Glimpse. It started with a glance. Not the kind you'd notice, just a flicker in your peripheral vision. But when that same flicker turns up outside your house, follows you down quiet streets, and appears in reflections when you're supposed to be alone, that's when a glance becomes something far more sinister. This is the first of 3 true tales about stalkers who didn't just watch, they crossed the line. And once they did, there was no going back. My name is Claire. I was 22 when it happened. A college student juggling 2 part-time jobs, caffeine, and a messy apartment. The city I lived in wasn't huge, but it was big enough that strangers blended into the background. I first saw him at the university cafe where I worked. It was raining, and the place was nearly empty. He wore a red hoodie, the kind that looked worn in, with fraying seams and a few stains. He didn't order anything. Just stood by the counter, staring, not at the pastries or menu, but at me. I remember forcing a smile. "Can I help you?" I asked. He didn't reply. Just stared for a few seconds longer, then left. I laughed it off with my coworker Ellie, calling him Red Riding Hood. We joked he was too broke to buy a muffin. But inside, something had felt wrong. That should have been the end of it. A weird guy passing through. But 2 days later, he was back. Same hoodie. Same silence. Same stare. Except this time, he followed me with his eyes when I moved behind the counter. When I dropped a tray and bent to pick it up, I felt his gaze like a hand pressing on my spine. He stood there for 10 minutes, then left again without a word. I told my manager. He brushed it off. "Probably a lonely guy with a crush," he said. "Don't flatter yourself." That night, I walked home with my keys wedged between my fingers. 3 nights later, I saw the hoodie again, this time outside my apartment. I lived on the 2nd floor of a low-rise building. My bedroom window overlooked the street. Around 1 a.m., I got up to get water and noticed movement by the lamppost across the road. Someone was standing perfectly still, arms at their sides, looking straight up at my window. Red hoodie. I turned off the light and ducked. My heart was pounding, breath shallow. I crawled back to the window and peeked through the blinds. He was still there. No phone in his hand. No smoke. Just watching. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights off and the baseball bat my dad had given me beside the bed. By morning, he was gone. I tried to tell people. My roommate thought I was being dramatic. "You're in psych classes, Claire. You know about paranoia." Even Ellie, who'd seen him at the cafe, said maybe he was just socially awkward. Maybe he had a crush but didn't know how to act on it. But they didn't see what I saw next. A week later, I got off work late. I usually took the shortcut through an alley behind a 24/7 laundromat to save 10 minutes. That night, the alley was quiet except for the distant hum of a dryer and the soft buzz of a flickering neon light above the door. Halfway through, I heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Following. I sped up. So did they. I turned. Red hoodie. Closer this time. I broke into a run, bursting out onto the main street. My chest was heaving, my vision swimming with tears. I flagged down a cab and shouted my address. When I turned to look back, he was standing at the edge of the alley, smiling. I filed a police report the next morning. The officer listened but wasn't hopeful. No crime committed. No name, no plate, no address. Just a guy in a hoodie. He suggested I keep a log. Install a camera if I could afford it. I bought pepper spray and carried it everywhere. But the camera. That came a week later, after I found a sticky note on my apartment door. 3 words, written in thick black Sharpie. "You looked scared." I installed a cheap motion-activated camera outside my door. It notified me whenever it detected movement. Most of the time it was just neighbors or pizza delivery. Until the night it wasn't. 2:14 a.m. My phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the app. The thumbnail showed someone in a red hoodie, kneeling at my door. I tapped the video. He was holding a small mirror, angling it under the door, trying to see inside. I screamed. Not just fear, but violation. He was trying to look into my life, into my private space. I called 911. By the time they arrived, he was gone. Again. I showed them the footage. The officer looked uncomfortable. This guy's escalating. You may want to stay somewhere else for a while. I moved in with Ellie the next day. We crammed into her tiny studio apartment, sleeping head to foot on the bed. I felt like a burden, but at least I could breathe again. That night, I slept. The first real sleep I'd had in weeks. Until 4:02 a.m. when Ellie shook me awake. There's someone outside the window, she whispered. We were on the 3rd floor. I froze. Got up slowly and peeked through the curtain. There on the fire escape, crouched low and peering through the glass. Red hoodie. I screamed. Ellie screamed. He bolted, nearly slipping as he climbed back down. This time, the police searched the area. Found nothing. But now they were taking it seriously. They opened a case. Told me to stay with friends, vary my schedule, and keep the footage coming. I felt like a mouse with my tail in a trap. No matter where I ran, he found a way to reach me. He never spoke. Never touched me. But every look, every note, every camera caught whisper of a presence. It was worse than any scream. Because silence makes room for the imagination. And in that silence, he wasn't just a man in a hoodie anymore. He was a shadow, creeping into the corners of my life. And he wasn't done yet. Part 2. No place left to hide. How long can someone run before exhaustion sets in? Before fear turns from a sharp jolt to a slow, suffocating fog? When your stalker knows your routines, your hiding spots, your life. It's not a question of if he'll show up again. After the fire escape incident, I moved in with my older brother Mason, who lived in a gated complex with keycard entry and a 24-hour front desk. It felt secure, clean, structured, distant from the chaos I'd left behind. The detective assigned to my case, Officer Stalker, was young but serious. You did the right thing moving here, she told me, jotting down notes. If he escalates again, we'll have enough for a restraining order, and maybe more. Maybe. That word, maybe, clung to me like mildew. Not comforting. Not promising. Just lingering. Still, for 3 days, there was silence. No alerts. No sightings. No red hoodie. I even started laughing again. But on the 4th day, Mason found something tucked under the windshield of his truck. It was a photograph. Of me. Sitting in his living room. Reading. The shot had been taken through the living room window. I dropped the photo when I saw it, my hands trembling. He was here, I whispered. How did he get in? Mason ran to check the perimeter. No signs of tampering. The security guards hadn't seen anything. Stalker came to collect the photo. It means he followed you here, she said. This was deliberate. Psychological warfare. He wants you scared. Mission accomplished. Mason installed a full home security system the next day. Door sensors, motion lights, cameras with cloud backup. He worked from home, kept a baseball bat by the couch, and never let me leave alone. But the red hoodie didn't care about security. He didn't need to break in to break me. It was 3:47 a.m. when I woke to the sound of music. Faint. Like a lullaby. I sat up, blinking into the darkness. It was coming from outside. I got up and peered through the blinds. Across the street, just beyond the range of the motion lights, someone was standing beneath the tree. A small radio at his feet played an eerie old-timey tune, something like a warped music box from a haunted carnival. The figure didn't move, didn't dance, just stood, listening. I knew that slouch, that stillness. Red hoodie. I called Mason, who sprinted from his room. By the time we opened the door and stormed outside, the music had stopped. The street was empty. The radio was gone. The camera facing that direction had been unplugged. Later that day, I found another sticky note, this time inside my backpack. You dream of me now, don't you? I hadn't used the backpack in days. It had been on a hook in Mason's closet. He'd been inside again. That's when I stopped sleeping. Even caffeine couldn't fight off the nightmares. One night, I dreamed I woke up and he was lying next to me, face hidden under the hoodie, breathing in sync with mine. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. I just stared, feeling his heat beside me. When I actually woke up, the blanket was turned down like someone had slid in, and then out. I checked the security feed. At 2:19 a.m., there was a 3-minute gap in the recording. The camera had cut out. Dalka took it seriously now. She set up patrols in the area. Checked nearby businesses for surveillance footage. Mason bought a gun. I started writing goodbye letters, just in case. One night, after Mason left to get groceries, I heard the door unlock. The bolt slid back. The handle turned. I froze, clutching the pepper spray. Then Mason's voice. It's me. He walked in carrying bags. I collapsed in relief. But something nagged at me. How did you get in? He looked confused. I used my key. I stared at the deadbolt. I locked it after you left. We tested it. His key didn't turn the deadbolt, just the main knob lock. Which meant someone else had a copy. Mason tore apart the apartment, looking for bugs, cameras, anything. We found nothing. Until I opened the kitchen drawer. Nestled beneath the tinfoil and sandwich bags was the same small mirror the man in the red hoodie had used weeks ago. Mason wanted to leave. Said we could drive upstate, stay in a cabin for a while. Somewhere with no signal, no distractions, no stalkers. I agreed. We left that night. The cabin belonged to a friend of his, tucked deep in the woods 3 hours from the city. No neighbors. No internet. No reception. Just trees, wind, and the sound of your own breathing. I hated how peaceful it was. It felt like a perfect place to die. But the first few days were quiet. I read. We cooked. Played cards. I even started sketching again. I began to think maybe we'd shaken him. Maybe he'd gotten bored. Until the knocking started. It was just past midnight. 3 knocks. Not on the front door, but the window behind the couch, facing the forest. Mason jumped up, grabbed the gun, and sprinted outside. I ran to the kitchen to call 911. No signal. He came back inside 10 minutes later, pale and sweating. No one's out there, he said. But he handed me something he'd found resting on the windowsill. It was my student ID. The one I'd lost weeks ago at the cafe. The next morning, Mason's truck wouldn't start. The engine had been sliced. Wires yanked out like spaghetti. There were footprints in the dirt, circling the cabin. He'd been walking around us while we slept. Watching. Maybe even standing right outside our door. That night, Mason stayed awake while I tried to rest. But sometime around 2 a.m., I heard his voice. Urgent, low. Claire, wake up. Don't move. Just look. I turned my head slowly. There, standing outside the bedroom window, mere inches from the glass, was the man in the red hoodie. He was smiling. And holding a knife. It's when. I didn't know it yet, but everything that had come before, the notes, the photos, the music, it was just a game. And the game had changed. Because now, he wasn't just haunting the edges of my life. He was inviting himself in. And next time, he wasn't going to knock. Part 3, Blood on the Glass. When someone decides you belong to them, no lock is strong enough. No cabin is remote enough. No nightmare is terrifying enough. Because this isn't a dream you wake up from. It's the reality you run out of time to escape. For almost a full minute, we stared at him, frozen. The man in the red hoodie stood motionless outside the bedroom window, his face obscured, but his grin wide and unmistakable beneath the faint porch light. In his hand, he slowly raised the knife and tapped it against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Like he was asking permission to come in. Mason raised the gun and shouted, "Get the hell away!" The man didn't flinch. He just smiled wider. Then he disappeared into the dark as quickly as he'd come, swallowed by the trees without a sound. Mason locked every window and door, again, and sat by the window until the sun came up, gun resting on his lap, eyes bloodshot. But I knew something he didn't. This wouldn't end with locks or daylight. He wasn't stalking me for a moment. He was stalking me for the finale. The next morning, we found red paint smeared across the window he'd stood at. Not blood. Paint. Bright, dripping lines shaped into a crude heart. Inside it, he'd written, "You're safest with me." We packed immediately. The truck still wouldn't start. No signal. No phone line. Mason grabbed a map and plotted a 6-mile hike to the nearest ranger station. He brought the gun. I carried a flashlight and water. We locked the cabin and started walking. But after an hour of trekking, Mason stopped cold in the middle of the path. "Claire, look at that." I followed his gaze. Hanging from a tree branch was a hoodie. Not red. Mine. My college hoodie. The one I'd left at my apartment before the first break-in. It had a small note pinned to the front. "Told you I'd follow you anywhere." Below it, a crude drawing of a cabin with 2 stick figures inside. One had a red smile. The other had XS for eyes. My knees buckled. I would have fallen if Mason hadn't caught me. "Let's go," he said. "We're not stopping again." 3 hours later, we finally saw the ranger station. An old, squat wooden building just across a narrow river. But there was no bridge. Only a rusted canoe tied to a post on the riverbank. "Better than nothing," Mason said, helping me in first before untying the rope. Halfway across, I felt something bump the bottom. Then again. Mason froze. "Probably just rocks," he muttered, but his eyes scanned the water nervously. The next bump rocked the canoe hard enough to slosh water over the edge. That's when we saw it. Floating near the far bank. A mannequin head, female, lifeless eyes, drenched hair. Taped to the top was a Polaroid. Of me. Sleeping. From the night before. In the cabin. We both screamed and paddled harder than I thought possible. We hit the other side breathless and soaked. Mason pulled the canoe up onto shore and grabbed the photo. "Where the hell did he take this?" he asked, voice shaking. That's when I noticed the red mark on the bottom corner. A fingerprint. Still wet. He'd just left it there. The ranger station was empty. Door unlocked. No power. Radios dead. Inside was a single desk, a coffee cup filled with mold, and a bulletin board. Pinned to the board were newspaper clippings. All small town stuff, missing dogs, volunteer days, a local chili contest. And one article that made my breath catch. College student missing after reporting stalker. It wasn't about me. It was a girl named Ellie Jennings, from a nearby town. She'd gone missing 2 years earlier, after filing a police report about a man who kept showing up near her apartment in a red hoodie. Her body had never been found. My fingers trembled as I traced the photo next to the article. It wasn't just similar. It was identical. Same hoodie. Same grin. Same knife. Same guy. He'd done this before. Mason and I didn't speak as we left the station. Just walked in silence toward the nearby logging road, hoping to flag someone down. But after another mile, we heard a car approaching. We sprinted toward it. It was a park ranger SUV. We waved frantically, and it pulled over. A woman in her 40s stepped out. "Are you okay?" she asked. We blurted out everything. The break-ins. The hoodie. The photos. The paint. The mannequin. She looked shocked. But as I spoke, I noticed something strange. Her radio was off. Completely unplugged. And the back seat had a red hoodie tossed across it. I froze. Mason didn't notice. I think he's still out there, somewhere near the river, he told her. The woman nodded slowly. Too slowly. Then she smiled. I'm sure he is. That's when she pulled the gun from her belt and aimed it at us. Inside the truck, she said. Now. We obeyed. What else could we do? In the back seat, I could barely breathe. My eyes darted to the hoodie. There was something in the pocket. A folded paper. While the ranger drove, I slowly reached inside and pulled it out. A photo. Of the ranger. Standing with the man in the red hoodie. They were smiling. Behind them was the mannequin. A real one this time. Ellie Jennings. We were being taken somewhere. I didn't know where, but Mason kept whispering. We'll jump out. Just wait. First sharp turn. I'll open the door. Then, opportunity. A deer ran into the road. She slammed the brakes. And Mason kicked the door open, grabbing my wrist. We hit the ground hard and ran, ignoring the yells behind us. Through trees. Over brush. Hearts pounding. We didn't stop until we reached a ravine. Too steep to cross. No signal. No town. No help. But we weren't alone. Because down below, just across the ravine, the man in the red hoodie was waiting. He looked up at me. Then slowly raised his hand. And waved. I used to think horror stories happened to someone else. In books. In headlines. In whispers from neighbors. But this wasn't fiction. It was my life. And he'd written himself into every chapter. But there was one thing he hadn't accounted for. I was ready to end the story, on my own terms. Even if it meant doing something that scared me more than him.